Are we live? All right, I think we're here. Let me know. I don't have a, wow. Let me see something here. Oh. Hi, guys. All right, cool. Well, so we're trying something new tonight. We are actually broadcasting this video live on Zoom. Um, so that way we can have guests and this will be the way we'll do it from now on. So I'm gonna skip our little, hi Denise. I'm gonna skip our little intro tonight and just say welcome to Common Ground. Tonight's topic is, as you probably read, can a virus be racist? So we're gonna talk again about coronavirus, but whatever else you guys want to talk about, please feel free to chime in and join us. Let me go back here, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna see how this works. It's our first time doing this, so bear with us. And I'm going to bring in my co-host, Eric Rodriguez, who's going to be joining me tonight. And we'll go into gallery view for Eric and I. Rodriguez. Hi there, Eric. Eric, I'm unable to hear you.
Well, that's how's it now?
I can hear you now. No problem.
I have my Zoom.
I'm unable to hear you.
Oh, hold on.
You need headphones. You know what? I'm going to get them too. That way we can spare ourselves any embarrassments. Well, it's too late for that. Hey guys, so what I'm gonna have to do here is pop back and forth between the Zoom feed and, hold on a second. Let me turn these on. There we go. Between the Zoom feed and the Facebook feed so that I can see your messages because it doesn't show me on the Zoom feed. But this is going to allow us to do some cool stuff. So this is going to allow us to, first of all, this is going to allow us to have guests. First, Eric and I we don't have to sit socially distanced. We can both be here very close. We'll going to try to get Eric to face a light one of these days. But and then the other thing is that this will allow us to bring guests on the show, which has been a long time goal of ours. We'll be able to have guests, people who will come on the show and pop in here in Zoom and participate with us. So we're trying it out for the first time tonight. I'm excited about it. I want to know that you guys can hear and see me okay. Let me see.
So, all day long, I was on a variety of meetings, and of course, the sun's in a different place now than it was earlier today. So, it was great all morning. It was perfect. I moved my furniture around, and then again, I was backlit. So now we're talking. And I think that I don't need my headphones because I think that I wasn't on the Zoom yet, and so I was watching to see if you were coming on Facebook. So I just turned that off.
So the tricky part of this, and we're learning this as we how to do this as we go. The tricky part is I can't see the comments until if I'm in the Zoom platform. So I have to go back and forth between platforms, which is not too tough to do. So tonight's topic, guys, was sort of a ridiculous question. Can a virus be racist? Of course, a virus cannot be racist. But we are going to talk about how this virus has affected different segments of our population differently and talk about why maybe that is. I want to hear your views and your opinions, of course, as well. And anything else you guys want to talk about, please feel free to chime in. This is Common Ground, your show, and this is the place where we encourage open and healthy and civil discussion. Hi, Carol. It's good to have you here. So I'm going to kick it off with a statement, and I want to see what you guys, if anybody agrees with me. I'm kind of ready to just say I'm kind of ready to have this disease. I'm kind of ready to say, I just want to get it over with. I'd rather just get it over with. I almost feel like it would be great if there was a way that I could go somewhere and then immediately become deliberately infected with the virus and tell all my family and friends, I'll see you in 3 weeks. I'm going to be completely separate. Because look, I'm not that old. I don't have comorbidities. So I got probably an 80% chance that it would really just be like a sickness or a bad flu. I'll take those odds and then I could get back to my normal life. But that's a thought that I've had in my head. Now, my normal life actually has been my life's been pretty good during this time, actually. One of the reasons we're using Zoom is that my company, we do events all over the world. We've been able to do them virtually. So my after a rough 3 weeks, my work regimen hasn't really been affected that much. But I still think about just that idea of at some point, to some extent, we are probably going to have to just confront this virus because we haven't handled it correctly in terms of how to address it as a nation. We've had a lot of, we're not the only one. A lot of countries around the world have had a lot of problems facing it. But now we're in this situation where we're just in this nebulous region where nobody knows who to trust. Nobody knows what to do. And I think that you're just going to see people saying, screw it, and going out and taking risks.
So, I heard someone say this yesterday, and I held my tongue, but that's not why you have me on here right now, is to not say anything. Um, I certainly understand. I know I've got reflection off my glasses. Sorry, I've I can't solve that right now. The There's a couple of things that I think of right off the bat. There, it appears to be the case that most people in the next couple of years are going to get this virus. That seems to be, with the spread and with how fast the virus spreads and the extreme unlikely nature of getting a vaccine within the next couple of years, if ever. We are not science rarely gets vaccines for viruses, so that's probably not coming anytime soon. The reason that I personally would like to postpone getting the virus for as long as possible is that we know still so very little. And even though, yes, the vast majority of people who have had very serious health consequences or died from this virus have been elderly people and people with who had already had health problems. That's true, and there are tons of people who we don't yet know the damage that the virus caused in their body. We are seeing damage done to organs, livers and kidneys and hearts and lungs, damage done by the virus for people who had pretty mild symptoms. There's a whole bunch of cases with children there's a syndrome that they're seeing that there is connected with COVID, even though the actual illness that the children experienced was mild. We still know very little about the virus, and our treatments are still not very good. In a year from now, we're going to have excellent treatments for this, and we're gonna be able, because that's what we do. We learn how illnesses work, and then we learn how to treat the symptoms and mitigate the damage done to the body. So for me personally, I mean, not only should we be worried about what we've always been worried about, which is a fast spread that overwhelms the healthcare industry and then also creates a shutdown of the economy that we can't control and we can't open back up because there's so many sick people. But also, just in terms of those of us, like just in terms of getting treatment, we want to wait. We want to put that off. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons for everybody, including myself, that I want to put this off as long as I can.
Yeah, so it seems like the bulk of people that are watching agree with you. They think, except, so Natalie said, if I get sick, I'll survive. Plus, I swear I had it returning from Vegas. Yeah, I kind of feel like maybe I had it too. So my, so that impulse, obviously, it's not the only thing I think about this, but that has entered my mind, and I believe that it's the reason it enters my mind is something that I want to talk about a little bit tonight, as we get into our main topic, is that there's just such a high degree of, first of all, unclear information about what the plan is for how we're going to deal with this. And then there's a tremendous amount of mistrust in our scientists and our institutions about what they're recommending and why. I believe there's a very unclear message coming from Washington on this and from the White House. Very, very sort of just an inconsistent message on it. And I just think that all of these things are going to coalesce into sort of like I think people are, if you're unless you're completely hibernating, you're going to sort of have this upheaval of like coronavirus madness that just I can see people just saying screw it, let's just face it and see what happens. I don't think that's a wise thing to do, and I hope we don't do that collectively. But I want to talk to you, Eric. What did you learn this week? And I want to find out what our viewers out there think about this as well. It is true that coronavirus is having an impact on minorities. An inordinate amount of the disease is fatal among minorities. It's obviously it's primarily among older people, but it's also just spreading more quickly in some of those low income and minority communities, and that has caused there to be quite a bit of editorializing in the media. I read an article today in the New York Times about this, about how coronavirus exposes the racism in our society. And so this is a virus. So obviously the virus is not interested more in African American people or Hispanic people than white people. So what do you think it is that is causing those impacts? And all of our viewers, I want to hear your opinions about this too. I want to discuss this because I think this is another thing that could potentially drive a wedge between us as a society.
So let me try to really briefly say something about what you said right before you said that, which is we're already seeing that. I mean, some of the protests and the rush to the beaches, we're already seeing, a fervor in people, and it is getting worse. People are tired of, there's a tension that has built up around not being able to do their normal routines. And as you and I talked about yesterday, I suspect that not being busy, slowing down, does not provide all the distractions that people normally have, and then they have to actually be with themselves and their feelings, which then creates a need for an outlet for that, whether that's scapegoating or whether that's exercising 7 days a week or going to protesting or whatever. So on to the racism question. I mean, the answer that I have, no, that there doesn't appear to be viruses don't appear to have favorite ethnicities. There occasionally there are a few things out there, health problems that seem to affect one ethnicity more than the other. However, this virus doesn't seem to be one of those. The answer, I think, is poverty. To your question, poverty seems to be, and there are certainly classes and books and movements based on the idea that there is a one of the major contributing factors to poverty in this country is institutional racism. I think that, and I certainly have no expertise. I'm not sure that there's any area that I call myself an expert in, but in just looking at some of the numbers, listening to some podcasts, reading some articles, it's pretty shocking how high a percentage of people how many more Latinos and Blacks are being hospitalized and are dying. There's a much larger percentage. I read an article that of a it was a very small study. It was done in one neighborhood in San Francisco. You and I know this neighborhood, the Mission District. It's
Yes.
And they tested 4,200 approximately people. 44% of the people who tested positive were Latino, and 90% of the people that died in that neighborhood were Latino. I mean, that's a big difference.
That is a big difference. And so our a couple of our viewers have chimed in here. Clara has said that it's lower pay and low-level jobs, especially essential workers in dangerous zones. That's a really good point. That a lot of people, that a lot of minorities have low-paying jobs. They're working in direct contact with the public constantly. They can't afford to take time off. So that goes to your point, Eric, about poverty. And also, Clara said they can't afford health insurance or to take time off.
Yeah, those are definitely factors.
Yeah.
Many people, many minority groups are working, as you said, in jobs that maybe they don't have health insurance. They don't have. I mean, one of the things that was brought up in the CARE Act and discussions in the CARE Act was that many of those people can't take paid time off. So if they have symptoms, they don't have paid time off. So if they have symptoms, they go to work. And if you're talking about meat packers, you're talking about field work, people working in the fields. You're talking about working in shipping and in grocery stores. There's a lot of people that are working very closely with a group of people, and if they don't have paid time off, they go to work sick, and infect more people.
AJ chimed in. He said tighter living quarters or amount of people in smaller places, like you're saying. Denise has an interesting comment. Huh?
Minority groups oftentimes live in with multi-generational families, and in fact, something that I read today, that the vast majority of people that are contracting this virus are contracting it at home. That somebody, one of the family members, got it from somewhere and brought it home, and they're infecting the people in their home. That's a giant percentage of people are getting it at home.
Denise said also, and I know we've talked about conspiracies theories on the show. That's Denise talking. She said, but they've been proliferating so much more lately on Facebook about vaccines, Bill Gates, and now Obamagate. It feels like more politicizing of the disease, which to me does contribute to racism. So, Denise, I agree with you, and I've seen a lot of those. It's really concerning to me that there is so much distrust of our institutions. And listen, I'm not saying that we should blindly follow and trust our institutions. They have deceived us in the past in many ways. However, I do believe that this massive movement, it's really a social media thing. Every human being that can log on to Facebook now has a platform. And maybe not everybody should have a platform, because we're all purveyors of information potentially now. And so anything anybody sees, they can forward and forward and forward and forward. And we don't choose what we believe or what we share with other people typically. And unfortunately, we don't choose it based on its logic or based on how much sense it makes. We often react to things emotionally. And so So it really concerns me that there is that proliferation of conspiracy theories out there, that really prevalent mistrust in every scientist, every institution. I read an article this week, and it's a gentleman's, I forget the gentleman's name. He's in manufacturing. He has a company that manufactures, among other things, some of the PPE, and he testified this week in front of the House. There were House hearings this week on our approach to this. And he said, he was talking about how we've actually known. So for those of you that are prone to think a little bit conspiracy theoretically, I should say conspiratorial theoretical, there's been a lot of people talking about this coming for a long time. This man, who's not even a scientist, says in manufacturing, he was being approached by the government back in 2004 about his capability to manufacture and produce these things because they thought something like this was going to happen. Okay? So this is not something that's been cooked up in the last couple of years by one group of people or one administration, or whatever it may be. We've had reason to believe this is going to be coming for a long time. But he testified about this, and he told the person asking the questions, she said, what do you think about this administration's handling of this? And he said, well, I'm a Republican all my whole life, and I will tell you that I'm ashamed. We have to do better. So he didn't single anybody out, as soon as I saw that, I thought, how many people will immediately attack that man and attack his credibility because he manufactures those things? He has something to gain, and therefore he has an ulterior motive and a hidden agenda. We immediately move to mistrust, and we do have to be discerning, of course, but to mistrust everything and look for the secret and the darkness and the shadow conspiracy in everything. In the long run, it's going to hurt us in a lot of ways. It's really, I think, going to have a negative impact on us as we deal with this disease. And Carol said, a wise young man said that while we may all be in the same ocean, we are not in the same boat. Clara said there are very loud voices about herd immunity and how Sweden is excelling, but they are 27% higher than normal levels worldwide, so they are very affected by it. We have 10 million people population versus USA at 317 million population. We have so much more to lose here. There is quite a bit of noise. The key is trust. Yeah, trust is a challenge for us. This is for me one of the huge issues that this has brought to light in our society is our lack of trust in our institutions. And look, the institutions that we have lost faith in play a role in creating that mistrust. No question about it. There's been a lot of deception and deceit and sneaky crap that goes on in both the corporate world, Wall Street, Washington, D.C. It's not like they're these benevolent organizations that have nothing but our best interests in mind. Where do we draw that line?
So, John, last week we talked about, the that conspiracy theory, and then it talked a lot about Fauci, and the thing that stood out to me the most was really the topic that you're talking about. I mean, we talked about it before. I think it's you cannot trust it right off the bat because of the silly music and the fact that there's no other evidence is brought in to corroborate. It's just one person's opinion who obviously is hurt, and it's no journalist or documentarian would ever produce that in a legitimate way. It's propaganda, and it's one person's hurt feelings. But the thing that I think is really legitimate in that thing is a description of the built-in corruption. And, there is a reason to distrust that. There are many people working behind the scenes who personally profit, and usually politics is involved when it comes to profiting in some way. They've either been supported by somebody that somebody wants them to vote a certain way or convince people in a certain way. And I listened to this long discussion with some experts about conspiracy theories a couple days ago. And it was very interesting because, as we talked about last time, conspiracy theories, oftentimes the people who are espousing them are doing so with a sense of they have some secret knowledge.
Right.
And
there's a psychological drive to be that person who is special because they possess knowledge that others don't have. That's an actual psychological report that was published about the nature of many people who believe conspiracy theories.
Comes through in the tone of the descriptions, the presentation of the theory, or the comments that you see from people. It's very clear that that's how they feel. And this expert who just got done writing a book about American conspiracy theories said all the data suggests that the conspiracy theories that get any momentum are the ones that are backed by the elite. So,
well, of course, yeah, that's interesting.
Which is hilarious when you think about how ironic it is. Like I got the special secret knowledge and you don't. But the only ones that the data just shows that the only ones that really get any steam are the ones that celebrities and politicians and back. They're when those are the people who are supporting them, those are the ones that get the steam behind them.
Yeah. So, well, and what do we do about it? Well, Denise said something, and Denise, thank you. It's very courageous for you to say this. I can't see the comment anymore, but she essentially said that she got sucked into a conspiracy theory. It seemed really credible, and she shared it, and she said it was an eye-opener for her to come up and say, how do we combat it? By doing what you just did, Denise. You were courageous. You admit it. And you looked into it, obviously, with a clearer mind and said, yeah, maybe this isn't real. I mean, we have to be discerning.
I think, John, to comment on your last question, I think that one of the things that we do about it is we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Each conspiracy theory has a bunch of facts that are actually true and verifiable, and they always have something, including that one that we were talking about. I don't want to really promote it. I don't think that it's healthy for us, but including the last one that we were talking about, the corruption in that exists for people, that exists in our system to allow people to personally profit off of scientific discoveries and things that are supposed to benefit our society from government officials. What we should do about it is we should do everything we can to demand transparency in those areas and sort of track down in what ways are people taking advantage of this. And it's the same thing that both parties have talked about, and yet we haven't seen much progress. This sort of draining the swamp. When are we going to stop? It's like, when are we going to start as a society doing anything about the corruption? Those that have something to gain seem to be so much smarter at getting us to divide amongst ourselves. And this is another topic. We've been talking about this for 2 months. It's not whether or not we mitigate the health risks or we take care of the economy. That dichotomy is deliberate by people who want to divide us. The truth is that we have to mitigate health risks and take care of the economy, and the only way to do that is to have open discussions where we're not pitted against each other. But there are forces that want us pitted against each other.
No question about it. Carol, I want to read Carol's point. I love it. She said, we have a culture that honors ignorance. Oh, boy. TV shows, celebrities, news people, and politicians dumb it down for the public. We stopped funding good public education, dismantling it piece by piece. The ulterior motive and agenda is in those who wanted that tax money for purposes other than serving the people. Thank you, Carol. I ranted about this last week on the show about reading, the importance of reading. Sharman Aranita has a comment that I think pertains to the core issue of the show tonight. The protests against the shutdowns, being it hanging out without social distancing or standing in a state capital with arms is certainly being enforced unequally. Imagine young masked black men with ARs yelling at police and lawmakers. So that's another thing, and I'm going to address this at the end of the show. What do you guys think about that? I will tell you, I have an opinion a lot of the time about the presence of racism that is not always popular among my liberal friends. In that, I believe that one of the ways that we get past racism is stop focusing on it so much. Obviously, racism exists, and when it occurs, we have to fight it, combat it. But also, we have to. There are forces who play that card no matter what, and try to draw us into that discussion because it's so charged, it's so heated, and sometimes I see that card played for the benefit of people who don't have good intentions. Okay, but I got to tell you, I see what Charmin is talking about, at least from what I've seen in the news. I thought that same thing. I see if black people marched with AK-47s on a Capitol building, I think there would be the National Guard would be called in. I mean, can you imagine how that would be addressed? So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this stuff.
That is that's the very plain example of white privilege. I mean, I mean, there's no, it would be, I'm interested to hear if you get some other comments.
Yeah.
Else to understand this, guys, with just standing there with their AR, and these are, I'm sure that somebody could find a picture of somebody who was not white, but they always, whenever I see them, they're always all white. And we saw some stories, and certainly there must be other stories that could balance this a little bit. But from New York last week, saw these police handing out masks to people who were not socially distanced in a park in New York. And on the same day, there were 2 incidents in New York in black neighborhoods where police were commanding people to separate from one another because they were hanging out in the street, not socially distanced. And then these things turned into, throwing black dudes down on the ground and beating them, tasing people. This was in the very same day, on a weekend day. And I'm sure that one could probably find, some story of some policeman handing a mask to a black person and
Sure,
person get, all in New York, probably the same. But those were the stories that I saw. I saw 2 stories of, video of, pretty darn aggressive and sort of intervention by police to get people to separate, and that led to people getting tased and beaten. And then police walking around in a park handing out masks to white people who were not socially distanced.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that too, and I'll tell you, I saw that being promoted by a couple of people that I think are those agenda-driven people. Obviously, look, I'm sure that most police in most cities across the United States of America aren't singling out black people to attack for these things, but I've seen enough of it that I do believe that is occurring, and it makes me scratch my head. I really try not to be triggered by those kinds of things, and I gotta say, it looks that way to me. Now, Carol said something interesting about it. She said whites can only address their own privilege, not other people's prejudices. I have seen how members of my family are treated differently according to the color of their skin. Every browner male has a police record. The blonde ones don't. That's a fact. And Carol's a former prosecutor. That's interesting to hear from you, Carol. I want to talk about. I want to respond to Pete. Our friend Pete out there had something to ask. He said, have we reached? Do you believe we are on at ground zero? in a paradigm shift where people are willing to sacrifice everything and allow governors and mayors to control their lives in order to be safe. So, Pete, for my money, I believe those governors and mayors you're talking about have been completely caught unawares by this, off guard, and they're just scrambling to try to make things work. I don't believe that any of them that I can see I don't think they are malevolent or diabolical in their intent. I don't think they have hidden agendas. Most of them that I've seen, and so when we're talking about a concession of a liberty, I think it's really, really important to know the agenda of the person to whom the liberty is being conceded, because we just, like somebody made an example in here about, the September 11th, we completely revamped the way we travel to address that situation. And some of our personal freedoms were they were forfeit as a result. And we all collectively agreed to forfeit those small liberties. Now we're talking about being able to go out and do the things we want to do. But I personally don't have a lot of concern about what you're expressing, because I don't believe that the governors and mayors are, for the most part, ill-intentioned and have a secret agenda. Now, if we're talking about big pharmaceutical companies trying to get us to do A, B, and C, I think there's ample evidence that they probably have a profit agenda, and we might get some misinformation there. So it just depends on who you're talking about, in my opinion. And I don't have a high level of mistrust for our mayors and governors. I think they're at worst incompetent, maybe, but I don't think they're nefarious. That's my opinion.
John, one, in my opinion, an important part of that discussion is there seems to be some narrative that stay-at-home orders are keeping people away from things that they want to get to, and like that's how everyone feels. The vast majority of people that I talk to do not want to go back into settings with lots and lots of people. They do not. I have talked to some of. There are many people who are afraid to go back to work. If there were no stay-at-home orders right now, it is not. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
The characterization that our governor is
able to control all that, yeah,
us to give up everything is just not true. People are going to very slowly trickle back in, and there are so many ways that we're looking at we're getting close to 100,000 people killed by the virus, and I know that some people distrust that number, but everything that we can research and that we can compare as far as death rates around the world, this isn't an American problem, suggests that those numbers are probably low, not high. And so that's with half of the people in the country staying out of big groups of people. So, we are going to trickle back regardless of yes, of course, there are going to be big groups of people that are going to say, let's go do this. They're going to rush to a restaurant. They're going to rush to a beach. And the media is going to disproportionately cover that because it's salacious.
So Denise said something. She said getting rid of the stay-at-home orders means they can stop paying unemployment. That's interesting. I see what you're saying, Denise. So Denise is implying that perhaps there is an agenda to get rid of those stay-at-home orders to conserve some of the money being that we are. Look, it's a financial bleed. This thing, there's no question about it. It's going to be very tough to navigate out of this economically, and.
John, I read something that I can't remember who it was, but it was a politician in another state, not ours, that said that straightforwardly. That's not like a suspicion. There are politicians who are very concerned, especially at the state level, where many states have to balance their budget. There are many state level politicians who are very concerned about continuing to pay all of the unemployment, because where is the money going to come from for everything next fiscal year? And it's true. And if you take the stay-at-home order away, and you choose not to go to work because you're afraid, or the owner of the business decides they have to cut back because, and many businesses, we have 20 million people applying for unemployment. We have, the real numbers suggest, even more than what the polling is right now, that people are out of work or underemployed, and some of those people, when we get to the next fiscal year, some of the businesses are going to have to lay off or fire people. We're going to take a big giant hit. And I there's a couple of people that I've talked to, and I know certainly in the organization that I work for, a certain part of what we do is not going to get to return to normal for a long time. You just can't risk people's lives, and so there's going to be a big unemployment hangover. Some of this is very temporary, and some of it is not. It's going to take a long time to recover from it.
I also read, to your point, and then I want to get onto something really specific about our topic tonight. But I also read today, excuse me, that the CDC is stating that the reporting systems are quite antiquated around the country, and so that we are not getting accurate up to the moment reporting on the number of deaths caused by COVID-19 and coronavirus, and that the number could actually be quite a bit higher. And then you have, the folks who believe that they're actually trying to make the numbers sound like they're higher because there's some type of financial incentive for hospitals behind that. But I know that the Trump administration, would like the numbers to not go higher. Their goal is to keep the numbers where they are. Trump is he doesn't hide it. He's, love him or hate him, the guy says what he's thinking, and he's like, yeah, more numbers sucks. It's bad. We don't want to know, any more numbers. We want it to stop right now. Of course, we all do. So I think that it's really, really important to understand that this could be more prevalent and more lethal, or it could be a lot less lethal. We just don't know yet. And once again, we've come back to this point a lot of times on this show, that until there is extensive testing and we really have a lot more data, we just really don't know what's going on. So I want to read a couple of comments here. Pete said, what seems to be happening is that we are changing ways of life across the board, when many parts of the country have not been impacted in the same way as the hotspots. Pete, I agree with you. That's true. And the reason that's happened is because of a lack of a plan to do targeted testing to find out where we needed these things and where we didn't. And I agree with you. Robert Boyle said, I want to know, if you get the virus initially, you build up antibodies and it changes, will you not be susceptible to the next strains? Does anyone have any medical experience on that? Robert, I don't know anything about that. If anybody out there does, please chime in. And then
tell you just what I've read, which is they don't know yet. It hasn't been around long enough. They have theories based on how other viruses that are similar have reacted, and that and typically when somebody gets a virus, they either don't get it again, or if they get it much milder than they got it before. And that's the kind of the working hypothesis until they get data that suggests something different. The reason for all the caution is because this seems to be so much more deadly and contagious. They worry that maybe there are other differences to this virus from things they've seen before.
So Carol said it is possible that we will never be able to reopen completely, and the world will not return to how it was before. This is the opportunity to create hybrid online brick and mortar shopping experiences, appointment only gyms and swimming pools, etc. We need to figure out how to live with this. And Carol, such a great point. Eric's been talking about this a lot for about 3 weeks that we need to innovate our way out of this. Trying to get back to some other place is probably not possible. And in my opinion, not desirable. I think there's all kinds of opportunities here for us to shift our lifestyle in a positive way. Obviously, I'm sorry that this is happening, but I think there are opportunities for that, and I want to use that discussion about changing our ways and innovating to talk about our topic about how this it has an imbalanced impact on certain communities, and one of the reasons that coronavirus has impacted communities of color is because of comorbidities. The prevalence of hypertension, diabetes, and these types of things that make this disease a lot more deadly is much higher, particularly in the African American community. Now, one of the reasons for that is because of the way we produce, manufacture, and sell food in our country. And this is really, really important. I heard a doctor, I have him in my notes. I'm going to forget his name. Dr. Katz was his name. I heard him on a show. I'll try to get his name, his real name, so I can give you better setup than that. But his point about this, and I loved what he had to say, and I want to actually read you his words. He said, we could begin a national health initiative based on encouraging Americans to combat pandemic by getting healthier. And that has two parts to it. So one of the reasons this problem is prevalent among communities of color is that they can't afford to buy real food. And I don't know if any of you have ever gone out there. Every year I do like a Whole Foods fast, not the store. I'm talking about buying whole, organic, good for you, healthy food with healthy ingredients. Guys, it's expensive. And I think that it's cost prohibitive. It's funny because when I was a little kid, and if you just served like boiled cabbage and plain old meat and stuff like that, it was boring, and that was the cheapest stuff. And stuff like Lucky Charms was a treat, and Twinkies were expensive. Now all that shit is almost free, and we pay a premium now. We pay a premium, guys. Think about this. We pay a premium to get food manufacturers to leave food alone, to not spray it with a bunch of crap and inject it with a bunch of crap and fill it with dyes and things like that. And all those things they put in those foods, to whether it's to make those cows produce more milk or whether it's to keep them on the shelf longer, those things cause our bodies to go into these disease states like diabetes and things like that, and it creates these comorbidities. So we can look at food manufacturing, and then we can also take responsibility for our own addictions to things like sugar. This is not just in the Black and Hispanic communities, our entire society. Even in pandemic, I said it a couple weeks ago, the lines to Starbucks and McDonald's are no shorter. Guys, those are sugar factories. Sugar produces these comorbidities that make this disease a lot more dangerous. So I hope that one of the changes that we can implement for all races across our entire culture is to really become more responsible about what we put in our bodies, and demanding that affordable food is of a higher quality. I think that's a huge issue.
John, to your point, the vast majority of people who are under 70 who have died from COVID were overweight, and the biggest percentage were obese. And we know that comorbidities go with, so whether it's diabetes or fatty liver or breathing problems or a variety of things go along, heart disease go along with obesity. It is a huge problem. And one of you, as you pointed out, the poor communities are the worse options they have for food, and so they're at higher risk because of the environments they work in. They can't take the time off, or they're not going to be working from home the way that many people are, so they're going to be exposed more. Their food is worse. So I mean, it does go to part of the racism. As I said, that poverty is the biggest factor, and part of that is racism and historical, so that that even things that aren't maybe not happening today, there are systems that got set in place and communities that got pushed into certain areas, and I see that we're starting to get low on time, and I just want to make sure that I don't let this whole discussion about racism go by without mentioning that we haven't mentioned yet. There has been a real issue around xenophobia and racism against Chinese and Asian people. There have been attacks, and there's been lots and lots of things on the news, and a variety of, and it, as we said last time, it promises to be a major, our anti-Chinese rhetoric promises to be a big part of the presidential campaign coming up. I just read an article and a little video by a doctor, Asian American doctor, who talked about a whole bunch of incidents that he saw in his hospital, anti-Asian sentiment, and it's out there, and people are really feeling it. There are a lot of there's now some campaigns going on to try to fight this. There's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment right now.
Christina Leeper said, started a garden yesterday. I encourage anyone who can do the same. 6-pack of veggies of green thumb is only $1 more than a single. That's kind of what I'm talking about, Christina. Like that's a shift in behavior. Like I went and bought a bunch of vegetables and made my first bowl of soup yesterday. I've never made soup from scratch before. I think cooking my own food will help in a lot of ways. It's a simple thing that I can do. I will produce less plastic and other crap that goes into the ocean, and this, as Charmin has pointed out, stresses on the environment have contributed to this pandemic. I'll be putting better food in my body and my family's body to keep me healthier. And like you said, buying the raw materials can be cheaper. That's a simple change that can make a big difference. And then Denise said, Charmin introduced an awesome point, that the stress on our environment, the deregulation that causes so much horrible living conditions among the poorest among us. Denise, in my opinion, that is why we are facing this pandemic right now. This is a theory that's backed by actual research, and I have no reason to disbelieve that research, that the reason that we are coming into contact with something like coronavirus, which is a well-known, if you guys probably know this, but it's a well-known species of virus, and it's very common in animals. Rarely it can jump to humans. One of the reasons this is happening is because we have entrenched and encroached on the natural habitat of so many animals because of overpopulation and our behavior, that we are coming into contact with these creatures more regularly, and they are fleeing to try to find a habitat and food, since they're being deprived of that through our behavior. So anything we can do that has a mind toward being more of a participant in a healthy environment, I am all for. One of the most important things I hope human beings learn to do in my lifetime is see themselves as members of the structure of sort of the ecosystem, not manipulators of it. We, as humanity, we've used our ingenuity to take ourselves out of the system and then turn it into like this petri dish for our own convenience. And if we destroy entire species, or I mean, my God, guys, someday, I've been a vegetarian since I was 19 years old because of what I learned back then about industrialized farming. Just check that one thing out. Look at industrialized farming, what it does to rivers and the ocean and to the ground soil and to the animals in the environment and ultimately to us. It creates a lot of these comorbidities that make us so susceptible to this kind of stuff. So I'm sorry to go off on a big long rant like that, but I just think it's so important. And then Trent said some of the bad eating habits in poor communities is a function of marketing in the U.S. and habit more than it is not being able to afford healthy food. Brazilians eat beans, rice, soy meat, and chicken on extremely low income and are much more fit. Trent, that's a great point. You're absolutely right. And that's not racial. I don't think that races are being marketed to so much as people on low income. The way that sugar and processed foods are marketed to people in a way that they're affordable, and then the ridiculous deception that they are good for you, that is criminal. It's crazy.
Yeah, and John, that's one of those places too that you and I are very similar in this way. You know, give us something shitty that happens, and you and I just try to find the motivation that makes sense where that person isn't a shitty person. But when you look into things, you find out, oh yeah, actually they are marketing really dangerous things to sometimes to certain ethnicities. Like you find out, oh wow, tobacco companies are actually advertising and targeting like 8, 9-year-olds. That's actually happening.
Absolutely.
Like it, and you and I, like, it's not where our mind goes, like, because we want to assume that people, when people do bad things, it's on accident.
They didn't mean to. Yeah.
They didn't mean to do that. It was an accident. But it's absolutely not true. Greed is a real thing, and people will do whatever to get ahead. And it is something that I don't think people should be paranoid about, but people should be aware that there are bad doers, and they intend to target groups of people in any way that will help them make money.
Pete said there's a movement for the reinvigoration of local farming. My son is working on an app that will allow local food to be purchased by app and delivered, and it will attempt to eliminate a middleman markup and allow farmers to increase their income and increase their productivity. So, Pete, that's so awesome. That's what we're talking about. Like, that's an innovation. That's a way to innovate out of this. Local farmers, let's invest in our communities. Let's get our food cleaned up. Let's make it more affordable. What a brilliant and wonderful thing. That was great, Pete. That was my favorite thing we heard tonight. Carol said, go ahead. What did you say, Eric?
Sorry. In a similar line, I just listened to a podcast the other day about there is just giant numbers of people across the country that are planting things at home, and even people in cities that seeds are like some certain seeds are being hard to find on certain delivery sites, and home baking and cooking and home planting are just exploding all across our country. This is part of the good news.
Yeah.
There
I hope so.
there are good things that are happening now. When we look at the political landscape, it's already back to business. It's already back to partisanship. But if we look at, there are just wonderful things going on. People are crafting and building things and planting things and cooking and exercising in ways that, like, we just haven't seen. And we talked about the people that have died. Well, also the amount of people that we know, there's like 700,000 people who have gotten coronavirus or COVID-19 who have survived, who've made it through. So, they're in each one of, the things that we talk about. I mean, we do tend to focus on some problems and try to discuss them in a good way, but there are many, many good stories out there, and people are doing all across the country. People are doing wonderful things. You and I talked about John Krasinski doing this Some Good News. What a delightful show. I mean, it's, I don't know how many people that's going to impact, but it is wonderful that some people are using their celebrity, which equates to power. Some people are using their power to lift people's spirits, and that's happening all over the place. There are, people donating their time and resources to all kinds of wonderful things. So I certainly don't want some of our topics to get people down in a way that doesn't accurately. You and I, John, both are much more interested actually in highlighting the good things that people do. We just tend to, get talking about some of the more challenging things.
Trent said Trent said, in speaking with doctor friends, some of the bad outcomes for minority or poor communities in the U.S. on COVID are caused by less quality hospital care in those areas, similar to less effective schools in those areas. I'm sure that's true. And then Marcia said, when I moved here, I learned Maui could survive 11 days if the ships and planes stopped bringing our food. Bananas at Costco are from Mexico when they grow in abundance here. This has caused Maui to finally rethink all of this. Finally, Marcia, that's wonderful news. So I really that's what my hope for this is, that we are going to think of ways that rather than just furiously trying to through the use the weapons of fear to get back to some point in our past, that we can somehow put each other's well-being at the forefront of our minds and innovate ways that we can actually make our world better from this. And
I think that one of the things that and I mentioned this on the show, I think that our federal administration made a huge mistake by not ensuring that we had a plan and that we had testing in place and that we really took this very seriously from the beginning. We would be further along and the economy could be opening up if we had a better plan from the beginning. And there were people in January who had plans, and we could have done that. And certainly a month later we could have done it. And then another month later we could have done it then. However, the one thing that I think that is really positive about the current administration's philosophy is reminding everybody that states really have power over their own state. And to the point about Hawaii, and I talked about this a little bit last week, I think Hawaii and California, Hawaii is harder and easier in some ways because it's an island chain, but I think that in California, we need to act as an island as well. We need to be the country's greatest producer of PPE. We need to be the country's greatest producer of green technologies. We are producing a disproportionate amount of food here in California, but we need to also be the country's leader in organic food, and we need to be able to take care of our state for this pandemic and for the next crisis that comes up. And in addition to taking care of all of our own people, we need to be able to provide for other states as well. That's one of the things that I think is very positive about thinking about being of not having a federal plan. And then the way I think the smart thing to do, and I talked about this before about some of the countries in Asia, like Taiwan decided when SARS happened that they could not be dependent on China for their PPE and other manufacturing. They needed to become more self-reliant because this kind of thing was going to happen again. They knew about it. So you were talking earlier in the show about how, if anyone wasn't aware, I've been reading about pandemics like happening when, not if, for at least 10 years. There isn't anyone who, back to your point about reading, if you read anything, these things were like on Time Magazine, National Geographic years ago. We're, discussing. So, but anyway, self-sufficiency, growing own food at your own home or in your own state, and create, having factories to be able to take care of yourself locally. This could be a beautiful lesson.
I agree. And Robert said, I love the positivity, but the economy is going to suffer from this. So, Rob, that's true. No getting around it, no question. It's already happening. And that means all of us, everybody's in the same boat. But the silver lining is that maybe the right parts of the economy are the ones we focus on as we come back. And maybe there are parts of the economy that maybe it's all right if they struggle. Look, guys, there is such decimation of our global environment from the production and use of fossil fuels. We absolutely need to get wise and get off of those fossil fuels. And I'm not just talking about oil and gas. I'm talking about the plastic that's produced from petroleum that is choking the oceans. This was in CNN yesterday. America's renewable energy is set to surpass coal for the first month ever. That's pretty cool. So once again, innovating toward the future that creates a better future is possible if we are at ground zero here, rather than, like I said, trying to claw our way back to something that we had before that we could maybe do better. And Ron Ellis, he said, "You guys are a bunch of scarecrows. Did you ever get the flu when you were a kid? Did you live? Wear your mask, you government puppets, and stay inside." Oh yeah, when you want more gun control laws, and now you might think you need to protect yourself, don't ask me for help. I'm already protected. So, Ron, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but welcome to the conversation. So, and thank you for illustrating one thing, that when we come into this with a bunch of anger and name calling, there's really nowhere to go, is there? So that's what the show is all about. So we'll leave that one there. What?
Been with a huge assumption. I mean, and I know Ron. Like that's a quite a statement to come in, assuming he knows our views about a whole variety of things.
Well, I mean, look, I don't want to pick on Ron, but in my opinion, when people do that kind of stuff, they're looking to troll. They're looking to get people riled up. I mean, this conversation's been going on for over an hour, Ron. I doubt you can pop in 2 seconds have assessed everybody's state of mind and what they are like. So that's just, we won't give that any more energy. Nadine said, yes, fossil fuels are horrible. So, let's see here.
One of the things, John, I wanted to mention when you're talking about this innovation, I hope it's true. And many years ago, you talked to me about how you believed that the way that we could solve a lot of problems in our country was to bring back the entrepreneurial spirit in Americans. And this is unfortunately, we have this discussion in the country that goes on with as if we have a free market. Our government supports disproportionately. They support giant industries, and it's not a free market. They stack the deck against the small guy, and I do still think the small guy does and can make it. She or he always do. We people innovate this. Both of the platforms we're using today were innovated here in California. In Silicon Valley, that's where Harvard was the first place that Facebook was used, but both Zoom and Facebook have their headquarters up in Silicon Valley. We do innovate here, and in our country, we still have one individual person come up with an idea and it becomes a giant thing. And as we were talking about, there are just giant opportunities right now for people to come up and fill gaps, for delivery services, for new ways to get services to people. Whoops-a-daisy. And Carol, you read that comment from Carol, and we talked about green energies and organic farming, and all kinds of whatever the innovations are. Now's the time to start.
Yeah, and yeah, we got. I mean, there's so many good comments in here, guys. It's. I just saw the curtain fall behind me. You can see the. Uh-oh, there's my washing machine. The mystery behind. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. So, one of the things that we talk about that, Eric, and I do believe that. I do believe that innovation is one of the ways that America becomes truly a leader again in the right ways. Because let's face it, we right now we lead the world in a lot of bad ways. We lead the world in gun violence. We lead the world in obesity. We don't want to be the leader in those ways. But one of the challenges is maybe we could do a show on this about how does entrepreneurship cope with rampant capitalism? How do small business owners compete with Walmart? How do those people you're talking about find a place in a market that Amazon has completely dominated in such a way? Right after World War II, about 65% of the population of the United States of America were small business owners. They were tailors and butchers and barbers, and that other 30 to 35% were employees of companies. It is flipped now, as of I think about 2015. Now 70% of people are employees of businesses, and a dwindling number of people own them. So that entrepreneurial attitude is what we want to bring back to this country. And owning a business is where that work ethic comes from, that community-centric thinking comes from, all those wonderful things that we need. And so we need to find a way to reestablish them in this new landscape, so that the control isn't so centralized around a very small number of businesses and people. But guys, we've been going a long time. We're way over. So, Eric, you want to hang around, or are you going to split for my my final words?
I'll stop my video because I'm not on Facebook. So at the moment, this is how I'm going to be able to see your final words. So I'll stay here.
Okay, guys, thanks for being here tonight. This is Common Ground. We're here every Friday night. If this is your first time watching the show, thank you so much. Please come back and see us again. And tonight, once again, we had a lot of new people on tonight, so I do a little bit at the end called The Way I See It. It's just a little bit of editorializing that I grant myself as the host of the show. And tonight I want to talk about a very specific, very small but very specific group of people that I see as a very serious threat to our safety as a country. So the way I see it tonight, I'm going to start it off with a quote from a book called The Dying of Light. And author Derek Landy writes, "Violence is never the answer until it's the only answer." We are a nation born of protest. Without disobedience to unjust laws, there would be no United States of America. But is all protest productive and positive? Likely not. And as protests continue to occur over states' decisions to open or close, allowing people to get back to their businesses, returning to citizens the right to conduct their affairs as they see fit, I'm afraid that we are seeing a type of protest that looks less like the courageous, give me liberty or give me death type of protests America's comfortable with, and more like an angry tantrum from people who can't hear past their own personal existential alarm bells. I'd like to take a close look at protests over the next few minutes in our country and explore by what metrics do we deem such actions worthy. Remember Vietnam? This was the event that led us to protest en masse, and those protests were the end of America's innocence in terms of what we believed our military to be capable of. It was a real sea change for America. Before Vietnam, we saw our military as the shining white knights of the world kingdom, riding in on our red, white, and blue chariot, drawn by the horses of democracy, free market capitalism, and the preferential treatment of God himself. In the first half of the 20th century, there had been little cause to question such a vision. Then the Tonkin Gulf happened. Millions of people, recently liberated either by free thinking or psychedelics or both, took to the streets to protest the abuses our governments had visited upon a far weaker foreign nation and upon our own soldiers, who returned home to from atrocity, not the same people, in what will live forever in the minds of most Americans as our first truly unjustified war. Unjustified war is now a cornerstone of America's economy, necessary to its continued economic supremacy, and common to all of us. We don't bother to protest it anymore. But in the 70s, folks were angry. They were outraged that our government would be so brazen and brutal with the people of North Vietnam that they would draft our own children into harm's way to fight that imaginary battle. They did not believe the war was being fought for the reasons the government claimed. And they believed that attacking the Vietnamese people was, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr. at the time, a blasphemy against all that America stands for. Remember Colin Kaepernick? Recently, he and many other NFL players chose to kneel during the national anthem before football games in order to protest racial inequality in our justice system, which undoubtedly exists to some extent. They were absolutely lambasted by an entire segment of America, including the President of the United States, for disrespecting the flag. But Kaepernick and his companions actually kneeled rather than remain sitting during the anthem at the suggestion of a former Marine who told them that they should hold that protest with respect for the flag. But that was the point, was to use their platform to create outrage, to give those who have no voice a little bit of a voice. I can go on and on. Women's suffrage, equal rights, the Million Man March. These protests are etched in our minds and in the history books as noble, if sometimes deadly, moments in our nation's history. I wonder how history will remember the people who marched on a government building in Michigan this week armed with grenade launchers and rifles. These are people whose cause is that their own perceived freedom is being imposed upon. This is not marching peaceably for the greater good. This is, I don't like what's happening. So I'm going to strap on my rifle, pretend I'm John Wick, and go down and intimidate the people who disagree with me. It's not a movement. It's a tantrum. And it's so very modern American. It fits right in with sentiments like love it or leave it, God, guns, and guts, make America great again, and with all the other silly nationalistic tropes that we believe make us sound brave and patriotic when we're blurting them out between chugs of Bud Light at Thanksgiving, but mean nothing really when it comes time to actually put one's country first or one's community. So, to all you would-be John Waynes out there flaunting your firearms as the tools of liberty, here's something to consider. The only tool here may be you. There's actual scientific data that support the idea that lockdowns have kept people alive. Yes, it is a hardship for you, but it's the same for everyone else in our country. Do you think there is any governor who wants to shut down the economic engine of their state? Why? Is it part of a diabolical plot to do what? To bankrupt your automotive business or your bar? The purpose is to keep people alive. Now, is it misguided? Maybe. It could be. But if so, what is your weapon supposed to do? How does that help? Now, marching downtown with your toy M16 helps you feel better, but it does absolutely nothing for anyone else. What do you believe will happen? An entire legislation is going to see you with a rifle and say, all right, you win. What do you want? No, you know that isn't going to happen. You're just pissed, and you want them to know how you feel. Well, in order to throw your John Rambo bitch fit, you've taken us onto dangerous ground, and I hope you'll turn around and go back the other way. People don't hear your message. They see your AK-47, and some of them may decide they want to throw their own tantrum. You want to see a threat to liberty? Imagine every American with a gun running down Main Street, waving it in the air, demanding they get their way. And I know that since you're 21st century USA, you think you should have what you want and have it now. But if you want to be an agent of change in this fight, you're going to have to do it the same way women and African Americans and every other marginalized group who saw their Protestant battles waged successfully did it, with a grassroots movement. Every successful protest begins this way, grassroots. Those messages start with a message. If the message is strong enough, translation, good for the community as a whole, then it begins to grow and spread. And that spread gives the movement time to mature. More voices can be heard. The best methods of moving forward get fleshed out by the members. By the time it's making headlines, the leaders of that movement have an army of supporters ready not to throw their rifles over their shoulder, but to serve the purpose of the message. If you and your 8 drinking buddies are the only ones in the truck with your deer rifles heading out to town hall, you don't have a movement yet. You will be a villain or a hero on tonight's news, depending which channel you watch, but tomorrow you'll likely be forgotten. And that is what differentiates truly great movements from what we've seen this week in Michigan. Truly great movements are really about what is best for the community as a whole, not just about some pissed off individual. There's a great recent example of this. Do you guys know who Ahmaud Arbery was? If you do, it is likely because of an online activist named Shaun King. Ahmaud Arbery is a young man who was killed this week. He was out jogging in a Georgia suburb, months ago. He was out jogging in a Georgia suburb when 2 white men who believed he may have been on their property armed themselves, jumped in a truck, chased him down, and ultimately shot him to death in broad daylight. Most of the incident was captured in a very disturbing video. Shaun King, let's get back to him. With millions of viewers on Instagram and Twitter, Shaun focuses his activism on drawing attention to cases of what he perceives to be police brutality. I first saw the video of Arbery's shooting on Shaun King's Instagram account. It's horrifying. But as an African American, Shaun King was incensed about this, and he was railing about the crime on social media many days before it hit the headlines. But he wasn't just complaining. He was organizing support from around the world, within the media, and also in local governments in Georgia. He organized a national run called Run with Ahmaud, Run with Maud. It had its own website. The petition got over 200,000 people to sign it. Those people were in the run. They were in this, I think it's a 5K run, posting themselves doing it and talking about why they were doing it on social media so that the message about what this was all about got spread all over the country quickly. This was nonviolent activity, and ultimately the men who shot Ahmaud were arrested, and they are currently being held without bail. Before Shaun got involved, 2 months had gone by, and there had not even been an arrest in the case. After his involvement, the case was a major news headline that made the Twitter pages of both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, ultimately reaching millions of people. The movement was a huge success. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Shaun King, a black man, had organized a small group of other men who looked like him to join him, and they had chosen to march on the Georgia legislature armed with assault weapons? I can. Here's what I think would have happened. A, they most likely would have been shot dead, because that's what happens often in this country when black men are seen with weapons. B, Ahmaud's attackers would be free today. The only thing that would have been served was Shaun's anger, and even that would have been brief. But Shaun showed what can be done with true strength applied to a noble cause. Now, what I see when I look at disturbing images of civilians with guns attempting to hold state governments hostage to their whims, I see weakness. I see people who can't control their panic and must act on it, regardless of how their fruitless actions might be affecting other people. And I see a behavior that very scarily might catch on. Angry dudes with guns holding me first protests. Imagine if some of those, when other people that don't look like them start busting out their arsenals to march their personal agendas. A violent race war isn't far behind in that scenario. Don't think that something so ugly could happen. It can. Remember, we're the nation that normalized shooting children in the classroom. I have another quote for you. Nothing strengthens authority so much as silence. That's Leonardo da Vinci. People should protest when they see injustice. I've seen 100 things happen in government in my lifetime about which I thought, why aren't we out marching in the streets about this? People, you live in the land of the free. You want to march? March away. You want to protest? By all means, it's your right. But please, this is a pandemic. Your state and local governments are likely completely caught off guard. They're scrambling to fight and provide answers, supplies, and some kind of plan for people. Likely, if there is a malevolent deep state plot to undermine your personal happiness, they aren't in on it. Your frustrations and fears are real, so express them. Protest, but I beg you, leave the guns at home. Bring your good ideas and concern for your fellow humans instead. You'll be far more successful in your pursuits, and you'll look a lot less pathetic on the evening news. I'll leave you with one last quote. In the service of the greater good, the threat of violence is the way of cowards. I said that, and you can quote me on it. Thanks, everybody. That's our show. We'll be back next week. Love you all. Please stay safe. We really appreciate you being part of this every week. And take care of yourselves. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.
I got to figure out how to turn this thing off.
The Zoom? The Zoom or the Facebook?
Facebook. All right. I think I got it shut off. Are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. I liked it.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much that, it can be a little bit disjointed. You know, I there's so much just in the protest conversation. There's so much and it's funny, like all I listened to and read about basically all week, there were three topics: testing, the economy, and conspiracy theories. Like the race topic wasn't up, and the protest topic was really last week. But there's just so much to talk about that we kind of meander around. But I certainly oh, are you calling me?
I am not. I think Ben wants to talk about this. Will you text Ben and tell him I'm going to have him get in the Zoom with us.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on a second. Karen told me we're still live. I don't know how to get out. So if you guys are still watching, I don't know how to get out of this on Facebook. I don't know how to end the. Hold on a second, guys.